In the winter of 1513, as Niccolò Machiavelli penned his observations from exile, he understood a fundamental truth that would echo through centuries: the greatest enemy of any ambitious soul is not external opposition, but the weak version of oneself that succumbs to comfort, distraction, and mediocrity. In our modern age of infinite distractions and manufactured contentment, this wisdom has become not merely relevant, but essential for survival. The concept of destroying one's weak self is not about self-hatred or destructive behavior. It is about the systematic dismantling of the inferior patterns, habits, and mindsets that keep us trapped in cycles of mediocrity. It is the recognition that within each person exists both a version capable of greatness and a version destined for insignificance. The choice between these versions is made not once, but every moment of every day. Consider the modern professional who wakes each morning with grand ambitions, only to find themselves 3 hours deep in social media feeds before noon. This person has not been destroyed by external forces, but by the weak self that chooses immediate gratification over long-term excellence. The external world merely provides the weapons, the weak self pulls the trigger. The Machiavellian understands that power, true power, begins with absolute dominion over oneself. Before one can manipulate circumstances, influence others, or shape outcomes, one must first achieve complete mastery over the internal realm. This mastery requires the systematic identification and elimination of weakness wherever it resides. In ancient Rome, gladiators underwent a process called damnatio memoriae, the erasure of one's former identity. Similarly, the individual seeking to become unstoppable must undergo their own form of identity death. They must identify every aspect of their current self that serves weakness rather than strength, comfort rather than growth, and execute these aspects with ruthless precision. The weak self manifests in predictable patterns. It seeks immediate pleasure over delayed gratification. It chooses the path of least resistance rather than the path of most growth. It prioritizes comfort over capability, safety over strength, and conformity over excellence. Most dangerously, the weak self is a master of rationalization, constantly providing seemingly logical reasons why mediocrity is actually the prudent choice. In our hyper-connected age, the weapons against the weak self have multiplied exponentially. Every notification is a temptation. Every entertainment platform is a siren song toward intellectual laziness. Every comfort is a potential prison. The modern world is designed to feed and strengthen the weak self while systematically weakening the strong self. Understanding this is the first step toward liberation. The process of destroying the weak self requires what Machiavelli would recognize as strategic thinking applied to personal development. Just as a prince must identify threats to his kingdom and eliminate them systematically, the individual must map the territories of their own weakness and wage war against them with tactical precision. This begins with brutal self-assessment. Most people live in comfortable delusions about their capabilities, their discipline, and their commitment to excellence. They mistake good intentions for actual results, temporary bursts of motivation for sustained discipline, and their potential for their reality. The Machiavellian approach demands absolute honesty about one's current state, no matter how uncomfortable this truth might be. The weak self has favorite hiding places. It disguises itself as work-life balance when it actually means choosing comfort over growth. It masquerades as self-care when it actually means avoiding difficult challenges. It presents itself as being realistic when it actually means lowering standards to match current capabilities rather than raising capabilities to match worthy standards. Once identified, the weak self must be systematically starved of the resources it requires to survive. If the weak self thrives on distraction, then distraction must be eliminated with surgical precision. If it feeds on comfort, then comfort must be rationed and strategically deployed rather than freely consumed. If it grows strong through rationalization, then the individual must develop an immune system against their own excuses. The Roman philosopher Seneca understood that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The weak self is sustained largely by imagined fears and fabricated limitations. It whispers that excellence is too difficult, that greatness is for others, that comfort is deserved, and that tomorrow will somehow be different despite no changes being made today. These whispers must not be argued with or negotiated with, they must be completely ignored. In the realm of attention, the weak self is particularly vulnerable. It cannot survive in an environment of sustained, focused concentration on worthy objectives. The modern epidemic of shortened attention spans is not merely a byproduct of technology, it is a symptom of weak selves that have been fed and strengthened by systems designed to capture and fragment attention for profit. The individual seeking to destroy their weak self must become militant about attention protection. Every moment of scattered focus is a victory for weakness. Every instance of deep, sustained concentration is a defeat for the inferior self. This is why the ancient practices of meditation, prayer, and contemplation have survived across cultures and centuries. They are weapons against the weak self. Physical discipline serves as both a symbol and a generator of mental discipline. The weak self is almost always physically weak, not because of genetic limitations, but because physical challenge reveals and strengthens mental character. The individual who cannot push through physical discomfort will struggle to push through mental and emotional discomfort. The body becomes a training ground for the mind. The weak self abhors routine and structure, preferring the chaos of impulse and emotion. It mistakes routine for imprisonment, not recognizing that routine is actually freedom from the constant need to make low-level decisions. The disciplined routine becomes a fortress protecting valuable mental resources from being wasted on trivial choices. Time itself becomes a weapon in this internal war. The weak self is a poor steward of time, treating it as infinite and, therefore, worthless. It procrastinates, delays, and wastes hours on activities that produce no growth, no value, and no progress toward meaningful objectives. The strong self recognizes time as the most precious and limited resource, treating each hour as an investment that must produce returns. The social environment plays a crucial role in either feeding or starving the weak self. Weak selves gravitate toward other weak selves, finding comfort in shared mediocrity and mutual rationalization of poor choices. They surround themselves with people who make them feel better about their limitations rather than people who challenge them to exceed their current capabilities. The Machiavellian principle of judging people by their actions rather than their words becomes essential in social selection. The weak self is attracted to people who speak eloquently about excellence while living lives of comfortable mediocrity. The strong self seeks relationships with individuals whose daily actions demonstrate commitment to growth, discipline, and achievement, regardless of how they speak about these things. In the professional realm, the weak self accepts whatever role it is given and adapts to the limitations of that role. It seeks security over growth, comfort over challenge, and predictability over opportunity. The strong self, by contrast, seeks roles and environments that demand excellence and punish mediocrity. It understands that being comfortable in a position is usually a sign that the position has stopped providing growth. The weak self has a particularly insidious relationship with information and learning. It confuses consumption with comprehension, entertainment with education, and exposure with expertise. It fills its mind with trivia, gossip, and low-value information while avoiding the difficult work of deep learning and skill development. The modern information age has made this form of intellectual weakness easier than ever to maintain. True learning requires the kind of sustained mental effort that the weak self finds unbearable. It demands concentration, repetition, practice, and the uncomfortable process of recognizing one's ignorance before building genuine knowledge. The weak self prefers the illusion of learning that comes from passive consumption of information entertainment hybrids. The relationship with discomfort reveals the fundamental difference between the weak and strong selves. The weak self treats discomfort as a signal to retreat, comfort as a goal to achieve, and ease as a reward to be maximized. The strong self recognizes discomfort as a signal of growth, comfort as a temporary state to be appreciated but not pursued, and ease as a potential warning sign of stagnation. This extends to emotional discomfort as well. The weak self seeks to avoid difficult emotions through distraction, substances, or denial. It refuses to process challenging experiences, preferring to bury them under layers of busyness and stimulation. The strong self understands that unprocessed emotional experiences become sources of weakness and vulnerability, creating blind spots that can be exploited by external forces. The weak self is reactive rather than proactive, responding to circumstances rather than creating them. It waits for motivation rather than building discipline. It hopes for favorable conditions rather than developing the capability to succeed regardless of conditions. It believes that success depends primarily on external factors rather than internal development. This reactive stance creates a fundamental vulnerability. When external circumstances become challenging, as they inevitably do, the weak self has no resources to draw upon. It has not developed the internal capabilities necessary to thrive under pressure. It becomes a victim of circumstances rather than a master of them. The process of destroying the weak self is not completed once, but must be repeated continuously. The weak self is like a weed that will regrow if the roots are not completely eliminated and the ground is not maintained. Vigilance becomes a permanent requirement, not a temporary discipline. This vigilance manifests in daily practices that systematically strengthen the strong self while starving the weak self. Morning routines that begin with discipline rather than comfort. Evening reviews that honestly assess the day's choices. Regular exposure to difficulty and challenge. Consistent measurement of progress toward meaningful objectives. The individual who successfully destroys their weak self does not become invulnerable to external challenges, but they become invulnerable to being destroyed by external challenges. They may face setbacks, obstacles, and even failures, but these experiences serve to strengthen rather than weaken them. They have developed the internal resources necessary to learn from every experience and emerge stronger from every challenge. Most importantly, they have eliminated the primary source of their own destruction. They can no longer be defeated by their own weakness because they have systematically eliminated that weakness. External forces may present challenges, but they cannot provide the self-destructive cooperation that the weak self would have offered. Part 2: The Fortress of Unshakable Focus. Having identified and begun the systematic destruction of the weak self, the aspiring Machiavellian must construct something far more powerful in its place, an fortress of unshakable focus that renders them immune to the infinite distractions of the modern world. This fortress is not built from stone and mortar, but from disciplined attention, strategic priorities, and an almost militant protection of mental resources. The modern world presents a unique challenge unknown to previous generations. Never before in human history have there been so many sophisticated systems designed specifically to capture, fragment, and monetize human attention. Every technology company, every social media platform, every entertainment conglomerate employs teams of neuroscientists, behavioral economists, and addiction specialists whose sole purpose is to make their products irresistible to the human mind. Understanding this context is crucial. The individual seeking to maintain focus is not simply dealing with personal weakness or lack of willpower. They are engaged in asymmetric warfare against some of the most well-funded and scientifically sophisticated attention capture systems ever created. The enemy is not merely distraction, it is weaponized distraction designed by experts to be nearly impossible to resist. The fortress of focus begins with recognition that attention is not merely a mental resource, but the most valuable currency in the modern economy. Whoever controls attention controls behavior, and whoever controls behavior controls outcomes. The individual who allows their attention to be controlled by external forces has essentially surrendered their agency to those forces. This surrender happens gradually and almost imperceptibly. It begins with seemingly harmless compromises, checking a notification during focused work, consuming one more piece of entertainment before beginning an important task, allowing one distraction to interrupt a period of deep concentration. Each compromise weakens the attention muscle while strengthening the distraction habit. The neuroscience of attention reveals why these compromises are so dangerous. The brain's attention system operates through neural pathways that are strengthened by use and weakened by neglect. Every time attention is fragmented, the fragmentation pathways become stronger. Every time deep focus is maintained, the concentration pathways become more robust. The brain literally becomes what it practices most frequently. Modern research confirms what contemplative traditions have taught for millennia: the quality of attention determines the quality of experience, and the quality of experience determines the quality of life. An individual with scattered, reactive attention will live a scattered, reactive life. An individual with focused, intentional attention will live a focused, intentional life. The construction of the focus fortress requires understanding the different types of attention and how they can be systematically developed. Surface attention is the shallow awareness that allows multitasking and rapid switching between topics. Deep attention is the sustained concentration that enables complex thinking, creative problem solving, and mastery of difficult subjects. Meta-attention is the awareness of attention itself, the ability to monitor and direct one's own mental focus. Most modern individuals have highly developed surface attention but severely underdeveloped deep attention and meta-attention. They can rapidly process multiple streams of superficial information but struggle to maintain concentrated focus on any single complex task. They are aware of what they are thinking about but largely unaware of how they are thinking about it. The development of deep attention requires deliberate practice in environments free from distraction. This is why the most productive individuals often have seemingly extreme practices, completely sterile work environments, devices locked away during focus periods, and rigid protection of their peak mental hours. What appears to others as obsessive behavior is actually strategic attention management. The fortress metaphor is particularly apt because fortress construction requires both building walls and eliminating vulnerabilities. In attention terms, this means both developing concentration abilities and removing distraction sources. Most people focus only on one aspect or the other, leading to incomplete protection. The elimination of distraction sources requires brutal honesty about which activities, devices, and environments genuinely serve one's highest priorities versus those that serve momentary impulses. The weak self will generate elaborate justifications for maintaining access to distracting inputs, arguing that they are necessary for staying informed, maintaining relationships, or remaining competitive. These justifications must be examined with the same skepticism that Machiavelli applied to political rhetoric. Is staying current on social media actually necessary for professional success, or is it a form of productivity theater that provides the feeling of progress without actual progress? Do constant notifications truly improve relationships, or do they prevent the deep presence that genuine relationships require? The most sophisticated distraction systems are designed to feel necessary while being actually counterproductive. Social media platforms create artificial urgency around trivial information. News organizations present breaking developments that have no practical relevance to viewers' lives as if they require immediate attention. Entertainment companies position consumption of their content as self-care or cultural participation. The individual constructing a focus fortress must develop immunity to these manipulations. This immunity comes from having clear criteria for what deserves attention and ruthlessly applying these criteria regardless of how information is packaged or presented. If something does not directly contribute to health, relationships, or meaningful objectives, it does not merit sustained attention, regardless of how urgent or important it claims to be. The concept of attention residue explains why even brief distractions can be so destructive to focused work. When attention shifts from one task to another, part of the mind remains engaged with the previous task. This creates a mental inefficiency that compounds with each additional distraction. Deep work requires not just the absence of interruption, but sufficient time for the mind to fully engage with complex material. This understanding reveals why the common practice of checking messages or social media for just a minute during focused work is so damaging. The brief check itself may take only seconds, but the attention residue can persist for many minutes, degrading the quality of subsequent focused work. The individual serious about building focus must eliminate these seemingly minor compromises. The architecture of the focus fortress must account for the fact that attention operates in cycles rather than as a constant resource. Different types of mental work require different types of attention, and these resources regenerate at different rates. Strategic focus management involves matching the most demanding work to periods of peak attention while using lower attention periods for routine tasks. Most individuals reverse this relationship, using their best mental hours for low-value activities like processing email or consuming news, then attempting complex work when their attention is already depleted. This is equivalent to eating dessert before vegetables. It may feel more pleasant in the moment but leads to poor overall nutrition. The protection of peak attention hours becomes a matter of strategic importance comparable to protecting physical assets. Just as a business would not allow anyone to randomly access its most valuable resources, the individual must protect their highest quality attention from being frittered away on low-value activities. This protection often requires going against social expectations and norms. Others may expect immediate responses to messages, constant availability for low-priority interactions, or participation in time-consuming but unproductive activities. The focus fortress builder must be willing to appear antisocial or difficult in order to preserve the attention resources necessary for meaningful work. The social pressure to be constantly available and responsive is one of the most insidious threats to focused attention. It masquerades as consideration for others while actually serving the convenience of those who have not learned to manage their own attention and time effectively. The individual who maintains strong focus boundaries is actually providing better service to others by ensuring that their interactions are high quality rather than fragmented. Meditation and mindfulness practices serve as both training for the attention system and diagnostic tools for attention quality. Regular meditation reveals how scattered and reactive the untrained mind actually is, while providing direct practice in sustaining and directing attention. The individual serious about focus development cannot afford to neglect this fundamental training. However, meditation must be approached with the same strategic thinking applied to any other skill development. Casual or inconsistent practice provides minimal benefit, while regular, progressively challenging practice creates genuine capability. The goal is not relaxation or stress relief, though these may be byproducts, but the development of attention control that can be applied in any context. The fortress of focus requires not just defensive measures but offensive capabilities. The individual with superior attention control can outthink, outplan, and out-execute those whose minds are scattered and reactive. They can process complex information more effectively, identify patterns that others miss, and maintain long-term perspective while others react to immediate pressures. This creates a compounding advantage over time. While others are distracted by the urgent, the focused individual can identify and act on the important. While others react to circumstances, the focused individual can anticipate and prepare for future developments. While others are overwhelmed by information, the focused individual can extract insights and identify opportunities. The development of focus fortress capabilities requires progressive challenge, similar to physical training. Just as muscles grow stronger through progressive overload, attention grows stronger through progressively difficult concentration challenges. This might involve longer periods of sustained focus, more complex material, or more distracting environments that still permit concentration. Reading serves as one of the most effective attention training tools, particularly reading complex material that requires sustained concentration and active thinking. The decline in reading comprehension and attention spans observed in recent years is not coincidental. It reflects the systematic weakening of focus capabilities through exposure to fragmented, superficial media. The individual building a focus fortress must become selective about information inputs not just in quantity but in quality. High-quality information sources require and develop sustained attention, while low-quality sources fragment attention and reduce capacity for complex thinking. The mind, like the body, becomes what it consumes most regularly. Deep work sessions must be protected not just from external interruption but from internal distraction. The mind will generate apparently urgent thoughts, worries, and ideas during focused work periods. These internal interruptions must be managed with the same discipline applied to external distractions. This often requires having systems for capturing and processing these thoughts without allowing them to derail concentrated work. The capture system becomes part of the focus fortress infrastructure. Whether digital or analog, it must be immediately accessible but not distracting, comprehensive but not complex. Its purpose is to provide the mind with confidence that important thoughts will not be lost, allowing full engagement with the present task. Physical environment plays a crucial role in supporting or undermining focus capabilities. The space where focused work occurs must be optimized for concentration, with unnecessary stimuli removed and necessary resources readily available. This often means having dedicated spaces for different types of work, each configured to support the attention demands of those activities. The fortress metaphor extends to temporal boundaries as well as physical ones. Just as a fortress has gates that open and close at specific times, the focus fortress requires protected time periods when no external inputs are permitted. These boundaries must be communicated clearly to others and defended consistently, or they will be gradually eroded. Sleep quality and physical health serve as the foundation upon which focus capabilities are built. No amount of attention training can compensate for chronic sleep deprivation or poor physical condition. The individual serious about focus development must treat health maintenance as attention maintenance, recognizing that mental capabilities depend on physical resources. The fortress of unshakable focus is not built once but must be maintained and strengthened continuously. Like physical fitness, focus capabilities degrade rapidly without regular practice and can be lost entirely through sustained neglect. Daily discipline becomes not just a means to an end but a permanent requirement for maintaining peak attention capabilities. The individual who successfully constructs this fortress becomes genuinely unstoppable in a distracted world. While others struggle with scattered attention and reactive thinking, they can maintain sustained focus on their highest priorities. While others are overwhelmed by information and options, they can filter inputs effectively and make decisions from a place of clarity rather than confusion. Part 3, The Invulnerable Mind, Mastery through Strategic Thinking. The final transformation in becoming unstoppable requires the development of what can only be called the invulnerable mind, a way of thinking so strategic, so adaptive, and so grounded in reality that it becomes immune to both self-deception and external manipulation. This is the culmination of the Machiavellian approach, a mind that sees clearly, thinks strategically, and acts with calculated precision regardless of circumstances. The invulnerable mind operates from a fundamentally different relationship with reality than the ordinary mind. Where most individuals see the world through the filters of their hopes, fears, and preconceptions, the invulnerable mind sees what actually exists. It processes information based on evidence rather than preference, makes decisions based on probable outcomes rather than desired outcomes, and maintains emotional equilibrium regardless of external circumstances. This clarity of perception is perhaps the most dangerous capability an individual can possess, which is why it is so rarely developed. Most people prefer comfortable illusions to uncomfortable truths. They would rather maintain beliefs that make them feel good than acknowledge realities that demand difficult action. The invulnerable mind chooses truth over comfort in every instance, understanding that reality-based thinking is the only reliable foundation for effective action. The development of strategic thinking begins with understanding the difference between tactics and strategy. Tactics are specific actions taken to achieve immediate objectives. Strategy is the overall approach that guides tactical decisions toward long-term goals. Most individuals think tactically, responding to immediate circumstances without considering how those responses affect their broader objectives. Strategic thinking requires the ability to see patterns across time and contexts, to understand how present actions create future possibilities and limitations, and to make decisions that serve long-term interests even when they conflict with short-term preferences. This temporal perspective is what separates truly successful individuals from those who achieve temporary victories but fail to build lasting advantage. The invulnerable mind has developed immunity to the emotional reactions that derail strategic thinking. Fear, anger, excitement, and disappointment are experienced but do not drive decision-making. This emotional regulation is not achieved through suppression or denial, but through understanding the function of emotions as information sources rather than command systems. Fear, properly understood, provides information about potential threats that require assessment and preparation. Anger provides information about violations of values or boundaries that may require response. Excitement provides information about opportunities that merit investigation. The strategic mind processes this emotional information without being controlled by it. This emotional mastery becomes crucial when dealing with other people, who will often attempt to trigger emotional reactions in order to influence behavior. Manipulation tactics rely on bypassing rational thought processes by triggering strong emotional responses. The individual with an invulnerable mind recognizes these attempts and responds strategically rather than reactively. The study of human psychology becomes essential for strategic thinking, not for the purpose of manipulation, but for the purpose of accurate assessment and appropriate response. Understanding how people actually think, what drives their behavior, and how they make decisions allows for more effective interaction and more accurate prediction of their actions. Most individuals project their own thinking patterns onto others, assuming that others share their values, priorities, and decision-making processes. This projection leads to constant surprise and disappointment when others behave in ways that seem irrational or inconsistent. The strategic mind recognizes that people operate from their own internal logic, which may be completely different from one's own. The principle of multiple perspectives becomes fundamental to strategic thinking. Any situation can be viewed from numerous angles, and each perspective reveals different aspects of reality. The individual with an invulnerable mind deliberately seeks out perspectives that challenge their initial assessment, understanding that the first interpretation is rarely the most complete or accurate. This intellectual humility paradoxically creates tremendous strength. By acknowledging the limitations of any single perspective, the strategic mind can synthesize multiple viewpoints into a more complete understanding. By remaining open to new information, it can adapt to changing circumstances more quickly than minds that are locked into rigid positions. The concept of strategic patience becomes crucial for long-term success. Most individuals operate with unrealistic time horizons, expecting significant results from minimal effort over short periods. When these unrealistic expectations are not met, they abandon promising approaches in favor of new tactics that promise faster results. This pattern of tactical switching prevents the accumulation of compound advantages that come from sustained strategic focus. The invulnerable mind operates with realistic time horizons based on the actual requirements of meaningful achievement. It understands that complex capabilities take years to develop, that significant relationships require sustained investment, and that valuable outcomes rarely emerge quickly. This patience allows for the systematic building of advantages that others cannot match through quick fixes or shortcuts. Strategic resource allocation becomes second nature to the invulnerable mind. Resources, time, energy, attention, money, social capital are always limited, and their deployment determines outcomes. Most individuals allocate resources reactively, responding to immediate pressures rather than strategic priorities. This reactive allocation ensures that resources are consistently directed toward urgent but unimportant activities, while truly important activities are starved of the resources necessary for success. The strategic mind maintains clear hierarchies of importance and allocates resources accordingly. Activities that contribute directly to core objectives receive abundant resources. Activities that serve only social expectations or momentary impulses receive minimal resources. This disciplined allocation creates compound advantages over time, as resources consistently directed toward important areas produce increasingly significant returns. Risk assessment becomes sophisticated rather than emotional. Most individuals either avoid risk entirely, pursuing only guaranteed outcomes, or embrace risk carelessly, failing to assess potential costs and benefits. The invulnerable mind develops nuanced risk assessment capabilities that can distinguish between intelligent risks with favorable risk-reward ratios and foolish risks with unfavorable ratios. This risk sophistication extends to understanding different types of risk. Career risk, financial risk, relationship risk, and health risk all have different characteristics and require different management approaches. The strategic mind develops specific capabilities for assessing and managing each type of risk rather than applying simplistic risk-averse or risk-seeking labels to all situations. The development of scenario thinking becomes essential for strategic planning. Rather than assuming that current circumstances will continue indefinitely, the invulnerable mind regularly considers how various changes might affect existing plans and positions. This scenario analysis allows for preparation and positioning that provides advantages regardless of which potential future actually emerges. Scenario thinking also reveals the fragility of strategies that depend on specific circumstances remaining constant. The strategic mind prefers approaches that remain viable across multiple potential scenarios, understanding that flexibility and adaptability are more valuable than optimization for any single set of circumstances. Information warfare becomes a crucial consideration in the modern environment. Just as military conflicts now include information dimensions, personal and professional competition increasingly involves information manipulation, narrative control, and perception management. The invulnerable mind develops sophisticated capabilities for distinguishing reliable information from manipulation attempts. This information literacy extends beyond simple fact-checking to understanding how information is selected, framed, and presented to influence thinking and behavior. The strategic mind recognizes that even accurate information can be weaponized through selective presentation, timing, and context manipulation. It develops independent information sources and analysis capabilities that provide protection against both deliberate manipulation and unconscious bias. The principle of optionality becomes central to strategic positioning. Rather than committing fully to single approaches that provide no flexibility if circumstances change, the invulnerable mind seeks positions that provide multiple options for future action. This approach often requires accepting lower immediate returns in exchange for greater future flexibility, a trade-off that most short-term thinkers cannot appreciate. Network effects and compound advantages receive special attention in strategic thinking. Small advantages that seem insignificant initially can compound over time into enormous advantages if they are systematically maintained and leveraged. The strategic mind identifies these potential compound advantages early and invests consistently in their development. This long-term compounding perspective affects every area of life. Relationships that seem only marginally beneficial initially can become tremendously valuable over decades if they are maintained and cultivated. Skills that provide small advantages initially can become sources of enormous competitive advantage if they are continuously developed. Financial resources that seem insignificant initially can become substantial wealth if they are invested consistently over long periods. The invulnerable mind develops what can be called strategic paranoia, not the dysfunctional paranoia that sees threats everywhere, but the healthy paranoia that regularly considers how current advantages might be undermined and takes action to protect against those possibilities. This defensive thinking ensures that success does not create the complacency that often leads to its own destruction. This strategic paranoia extends to self-assessment. The invulnerable mind regularly questions its own assumptions, tests its own capabilities, and seeks feedback that reveals blind spots and limitations. It understands that self-deception is often more dangerous than external opposition because it prevents the accurate assessment necessary for effective response. The cultivation of strategic alliances becomes sophisticated rather than transactional. Most individuals approach relationships from a perspective of immediate exchange: what can this person do for me now? And what must I do for them in return? The strategic mind recognizes that the most valuable relationships are those that create mutual advantage over extended time periods rather than immediate transactions. These strategic relationships are built on complementary capabilities rather than similar interests. The invulnerable mind seeks connections with individuals whose strengths complement its own weaknesses, creating partnerships that produce outcomes neither party could achieve independently. This approach requires genuine value creation rather than exploitation, as sustainable strategic relationships must benefit all parties. Communication becomes a strategic tool rather than merely a social activity. The invulnerable mind develops sophisticated communication capabilities that can adapt to different audiences, contexts, and objectives. It understands that effective communication is not about expressing oneself authentically, but about creating specific outcomes in the minds of others. This strategic communication includes the ability to present information in ways that lead others to accurate conclusions without triggering defensive reactions. It includes the ability to influence behavior through persuasion rather than manipulation. It includes the ability to build trust and credibility over time through consistent demonstration of competence and reliability. The mastery of strategic timing becomes crucial for maximizing the impact of actions and decisions. The same action taken at different times can produce dramatically different results. The invulnerable mind develops sensitivity to timing factors and the patience to wait for optimal moments rather than acting on impulse or external pressure. This timing mastery includes understanding when to reveal information, when to make requests, when to challenge assumptions, and when to remain silent. It includes recognizing when circumstances are favorable for bold action versus when circumstances favor consolidation and patience. It includes the ability to create favorable timing through strategic preparation rather than simply responding to circumstances. The ultimate characteristic of the invulnerable mind is its ability to remain calm and clear under any circumstances. This is not the false calm of denial or the brittle calm of suppression, but the genuine calm that comes from having prepared for various possibilities and having confidence in one's ability to respond effectively to whatever emerges. This unshakable equanimity becomes a source of tremendous power in dealing with others. While others become reactive and emotional under pressure, the individual with an invulnerable mind maintains strategic thinking capability. While others make desperate or impulsive decisions when circumstances become challenging, the strategic mind continues to assess options and choose optimal responses. The development of the invulnerable mind is not completed through intellectual understanding but through the practical application of strategic thinking in real-world situations. Like any complex capability, it requires regular practice, progressive challenge, and continuous refinement. The individual must seek out situations that test and develop strategic thinking abilities, learning from both successes and failures. Most importantly, the invulnerable mind recognizes that true invulnerability comes not from avoiding challenges or eliminating all risks, but from developing the capabilities necessary to thrive regardless of circumstances. It is built through facing difficulties with strategic thinking rather than emotional reaction, through learning from setbacks rather than being defeated by them, and through maintaining long-term perspective regardless of short-term fluctuations. The individual who develops these capabilities becomes genuinely unstoppable not because they face no obstacles, but because they have eliminated their own participation in their potential destruction. They cannot be manipulated because they see manipulation attempts clearly. They cannot be discouraged because they maintain realistic expectations and long-term perspective. They cannot be defeated by circumstances because they have developed the adaptability necessary to find advantage in any situation. The weak self that once provided cooperation to external forces seeking their destruction has been systematically eliminated. The scattered attention that once made them vulnerable to distraction and confusion has been forged into a focused instrument of strategic thinking. The reactive mind that once responded emotionally to circumstances has been transformed into an invulnerable system for processing reality and creating optimal responses. This transformation creates a profound form of freedom, not the freedom from responsibility that the weak self seeks, but the freedom that comes from having developed the capabilities necessary to create desired outcomes regardless of circumstances. It is the freedom of the strategist who can see clearly, think effectively, and act with precision in any environment. The man who destroys his weak self, builds a fortress of unshakable focus, and develops an invulnerable mind has indeed become unstoppable in a distracted world. Not because he faces no challenges, but because he has eliminated the primary sources of his own defeat and developed the capabilities necessary to transform any challenge into an opportunity for further strength.